Studying interpersonal communication is probably something you didn't think you ever would do or would have to do. I also never thought I would be teaching interpersonal communication. I grew up developing my interpersonal communication skills over what we called coffee in Minnesota or a little lunch. This is usually when people got together to drink coffee or other beverages and have a snack and visit about things. I did this so much growing up. I just thought everybody did, and that everybody would know the skills that are required to be a good interpersonal communicator. Later on in life, when I started studying communication, I learned that this was a skill that had to be developed over time. Of course, anybody can communicate, but are they effective at communicating with other people? That's what we need to learn in this kind of course. Let's take a look at Chapter 2, the overview of interpersonal communication. In this chapter, we will explore what is interpersonal communication, the purposes of interpersonal communication, components of interpersonal communication, the perception process, models of interpersonal communication, and interpersonal communication skills. So, what is interpersonal communication? It's about sending and receiving messages with others about personal experiences or information that needs to be exchanged. This can happen in formal and informal processes or exchanges. It can happen face to face or in mediated contexts. We're kind of doing a combination of face to face and mediated contexts here because you actually get to see me in real time while watching this video. However, I'm not actually sitting there so that you can ask me questions. So the feedback part gets a little muddled, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Interpersonal communication also helps us achieve our personal and professional goals. What is the purpose then of interpersonal communication? As you can see here is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You'll also see this in your textbook. We have to start with the physiological needs, then the safety and security needs, love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization needs. Believe it or not, every single one of these layers requires communication. In particular, it requires interpersonal communication. We need to be able to communicate the basic needs of meeting our everyday living expectations, right? Food, water, clothing, shelter, those kinds of things. Safety and security is what you have when you develop a relationship with family or friends, people who are going to keep you safe or you're going to keep them safe. And then, of course, love and belonging is what we want with family and friends and others with whom are part of our community. That builds our self-esteem, what we think of ourselves and what others think of us. And then self-actualization is actually realizing the things that have come before it, come before our self-esteem. We meet that or those goals and become self-actualized. If you'd like to learn more about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I encourage you to look it up. I just gave you a really quick overview here as it applies to interpersonal communication, but it is used in a lot of social sciences, not just communication. What is the purpose of intercultural communication? As we said, it meets your personal needs. It allows you to communicate personal needs. In fact, we've been doing this since we were born. We have been communicating what we need from other people since the day we were born. I'm pretty sure your parents had to try and figure out what you were communicating when you were crying as you came into this world. Were you hungry? Were you tired? Did you need changed? What was that all about? So we've been communicating those personal needs for a long time. Have they changed over time? Of course they have. But we still have to share what we need with other people and vice versa. This is why interpersonal communication is so essential. The purpose of interpersonal communication also includes learning about self and others. How do we learn more about ourselves to develop our self-concept, like what we believe in ourselves, how we look at ourselves? Are we a happy person? Are we a pessimistic person? Are we a realist? Are we short? Are we tall? Are we pretty? Any of those things, that builds your self-concept. And then your self-esteem is when other people match up with your self-concept. Do how other people perceive you match up? Does it match up with the way that you perceive yourself? It also is a building of and maintaining relationships. If you didn't talk to other people, it'd be really hard to build any relationships, and it'd be even harder to maintain them. Of course, this comes with wanting to reduce uncertainty. So when we get to know people, we really want to reduce uncertainty. In fact, we want to do this so much that Berger and Calabrese came up with the idea of the uncertainty reduction theory. People want to know what others will say and do. We want to minimize as much uncertainty as we can in any new interaction that we have. And this is cognitive uncertainty, like what am I thinking? What are they thinking? How do we minimize the uncertainty of what the other person is thinking? And there's the behavioral uncertainty. So how am I supposed to behave? How are they supposed to behave? What is appropriate in this social situation? So Berger and Calabrese say that we try to eliminate unknowns when we meet someone. No kidding. Wow, these guys are brilliant. Yes, of course you want to get to know people and to reduce your anxiety when you're trying to get to know someone and reduce uncertainty. This is the reason that people consider themselves to have social anxiety disorder. Although that is an extreme, many people are anxious in social situations because we don't know the new people and we don't know everybody around us. And so it takes some time for us to get to know people to reduce our uncertainty, to become more certain of who we are, the role that we're playing, and who these other people are that we are interacting with. Thus, we need to learn more about interpersonal communication, right? So, what makes interpersonal communication happen? Well, there's a sender or a source, a receiver, a message, channel, feedback, an environment, and noise. Of course, we're going to talk about all these things after a little bit in this chapter. But just so you know, the sender or the source would be like me here giving you a message. The receiver then is, of course, you. The message is what I'm presenting to you. The channel that I'm using here is mediated messaging. The feedback that you will ultimately provide is going to be a little bit slower here because I will have to wait to hear your feedback. Sometimes when it's face-to-face, it's much more immediate. The environment is the environment that I'm in or that you're in to make this communication successful or unsuccessful. And the noise is everything that's going around, either the things that I am thinking about, internal noise, or external noise, like if my room that I am talking to you in here is not quiet, like a classroom would be quiet, then we would hear lots of other things going on, and it would make my message to you pretty ineffective. Another piece of the puzzle, though, when we're talking about interpersonal communication is our perceptions. Do our perceptions matter? The short answer is yes, absolutely. The information that we perceive and how we perceive it is absolutely what we believe is reality. So a perception is the process of acquiring, interpreting, and organizing information via the five senses. Five senses: taste, touch, smell, hearing, taste, touch, smelling, oh, and vision. The continuous process, we continuously process our experiences and preferences to shape our communication. The perception stages include attending, organizing, and interpreting. So do we perceive only things we attend to? Since I said we had to do those three things, right? Well, attending is the act of focusing on specific objects or stimuli around you. We have selective perception. We attend to a specific thing while ignoring other things. We attend to things that are extreme, intense, exceptional, extraordinary. Or different, unusual, or contradictory. Sometimes we pay attention to the things that are repetitive, personally motivating or important, or something that fits with our emotional state. Have you ever noticed, we'll learn later that it's called emotional contagion, but have you ever noticed that when you're in a cranky mood, other people around you seem to be in a cranky mood? You only see other people who are in a cranky mood? Yes, that's because that is what you are attending to. You have selective perception. It is what you are focusing on. It is the specific objects or stimuli that we pay attention to. Now, if we are having a really great day and having lots of fun and there's lots of people and lots of parties and colors and everything going on like that, again, that's going to be extreme, intense, exceptional, and extraordinary, and it's going to make everything that much more fun. And we are going to perceive that, and it is going to make us emotionally contagious in a happy and positive way. So how do we make sense of incoming stimuli? Well, we have to organize it. We make sense of or define incoming stimuli by using some schemes that we've developed. In our brains, and along with the other things that we've learned in life, we have come up with some physical constructs, some role constructs, some social behaviors, and some psychological constructs. The physical constructs are what we expect someone to look like. Once we see that person, how do we expect them to behave? That becomes the role construct and the social behaviors. And then the physiological constructs is, how do we expect them to respond? What are they thinking? What am I thinking? And how do we communicate that? That is all what happens to us within a matter of minutes of meeting someone, seeing someone, interacting with someone. We are trying to make sense of all of this incoming stimuli. And the incoming stimuli doesn't only happen when you're having a conversation with someone else. Incoming stimuli happens all the time. Whenever your eyes are open, there is something for you to see, to take in, to understand. And we are processing all of that information continuously. So we evaluate the incoming information. We interpret it. This is the act of assigning meaning to a stimulus to evaluate and understand its worth. So really, in this sense, this is what I talk about when I say that listeners are selfish, right? When we listen for these things. Does it touch our backgrounds and experiences? So is it something that we have personally experienced? Does it involve us relationally or a relationship that we are in? What are the expectations that we are supposed to do with the incoming information? Do we have any assumptions about this kind of information? And will it give us relational satisfaction? Again, these are things that are happening very quickly in an interpersonal interaction. But we definitely focus the most on things that touch our background and our experiences, or that relate to people that we hold most important. It doesn't even have to be someone personally significant to you. It could be someone like your supervisor, it could be a coworker, somebody with whom you share a connection and would feel like you needed to know how somebody else was relating to them, how they were relating to you, etc. So there are some interpersonal communication models. I'm going to go through these quickly. I don't know that you need to be able to name each one of them, but it gives you an idea of how people who study interpersonal communication understand it a little bit better. So there are the action models, the interaction models, and the transactional models. So the action models are one-directional communication from source to receiver. Almost like here, I'm the source, you're the receiver, and the information is going from one place to the other. I'm not getting much feedback at this point. These action models include the Shannon-Weaver model, the Schramm model, and Berlow's SMCR. The interaction model is a communication model in which is continuous. Both sender and receiver are responsible for effective communication. This happens in most of our interpersonal communication interactions. I give information, you provide information, and it's continuous. It happens all the time. And there are also two models that we'll look at with that. And then there is the transactional model, in which the individuals are simultaneously the sender and the receiver. So we started out when we were understanding communication with an action model, one directional. Then we added the interactional model, so there was stuff going on. Then the transactional model came about to show that this is continuously happening at the same time, simultaneously. I'm not just the sender, I'm also the receiver, and there's all this other stuff going on outside of me that makes this communication interaction either effective or ineffective. So the action models. First is the Shannon-Weaver model. The Shannon-Weaver model is a model of linear communication. The sender encodes a message through the channel. In other words, the sender puts the information into the channel, which whatever the channel is going to be. It could be via telephone, it could be email, text message, letters, it could be any form of face-to-face communication, it could be mediated communication like we have here, any of those kinds of things. So the sender encodes the message through the channel to the receiver, the person who's supposed to get the information, and then the receiver is supposed to decode the message. And the feedback is not immediate. The problem with this is not always, or not often, how communication works. So we also have the early Schramm model that communication is not linear, but a process. Messages are interpreted based on individual factors. Just like what I was talking about before, things that touch your background or your experiences. Maybe you've heard of this called personal baggage before, but it's all of the things that have happened to you up until this point, up until this conversation, that you bring into this conversation. So the messages that we hear from other people or gain from other people are interpreted based on individual factors. So we assess it based on who we are. It is unsuccessful when feedback is absent, ineffective, or incomplete. That's true, although I don't think I'm being unsuccessful in communicating to you right now. So let's check out Berlow's SMCR. SMCR, S stands for source. Communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social systems, and culture. This is where the source has gained the information that they want to communicate. So I have learned the things that I want to communicate to you through my communication skills, my attitudes, my knowledge, the social systems I've been around, and the culture that I'm a part of, or cultures that I'm a part of. M is the message. What is the content of the message? What are the elements of the message? How is the message structured? How did we treat the message? And is there any code within the message that needs to be understood by both parties? Then there is the channel. The channel is seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. Those are the five senses. Often through the channel, these five things are communicated. And then the receiver, this is based on their communication skills, their attitude, knowledge, social system, and culture, and vice versa. So it's kind of it looks almost like a kind of cylindrical. It looks like it's happening in a circle, right? Circular, yes. Okay, so it looks like it's happening in a circle, but it's not really. It is happening simultaneously. So anything that I'm communicating, you're understanding, I'm communicating, I'm understanding, you're communicating, all of that is happening all at the same time. So that brought us the interaction models. The first one is Osgood-Schramm. And Osgood-Schramm said communication is circular and complex. Communication is reciprocal. So not only is one person communicating, but someone is communicating back to them. Unless you're talking to an inanimate object, there is communication coming back to you. Messages are based on interpretation. It involves encoding, decoding, and interpreting. And as you will find out as we go into our textbook, not all communication is verbal. There's obviously nonverbal communication too, and that is often believed more than your verbal communication. Watzlawick, Bevan, and Jackson also have a model of communication. Their model of communication is based on the fact that communication is continuous and conversational. It states that every message is meaningful. It has a stimulus, response, and reinforcement process. Communication can happen analog or digitally, and it can be symmetrical or complementary. All of these pieces will become clearer again as we go through our textbook. But as you interact interpersonally with other people and you're able to apply that throughout this semester, you will see how symmetrical conversations happen, how complementary conversations happen, and how things are different with analog, which is more of your face-to-face conversation, or digital through all of our forms of digital technology. Computers, Zoom, texting, iWatch, Apple Watch, everything under the sun. Barnlin transactional model. This is the one that we focus on most in the communication discipline now, is the transactional model of communication. It means that messages are encoded and decoded simultaneously. Communication is a continuous, endless cycle. Communication constantly changes. Ooh, somebody has a typo there. It's multi-layered feedback system involving oral and nonverbal communication, like I just mentioned. And communication is complex, so you have to notice the cues, the context, and the noise. As I mentioned briefly earlier, noise is both internal and external. So it's not only the things going on outside of you that you hear, but it is also the things going on inside of you. Like, are you thinking about right now? You might be hungry, you might be tired, you might be thirsty, you might have laundry to do. You have 10 errands to run after you finish watching this video of Dr. Heidi explaining chapter number 2. There's so much that is hard to tune out when we are trying to focus. The external noises can be even more difficult, especially if you have other people in your home where you're listening to this or other people in the office. There are plenty of other things that can cause noise and keep us from understanding communication clearly. So then we have the model of mindful communication. So what that does here is it takes the transactional model of communication and adds Shapiro and Carlson's mindful practice to it. So Shapiro and Carlson say that you should be mindful in all that you do, focused on attention, intention, and attitude. So what am I paying attention to? What is my intention in paying attention to that? And what is my attitude about those things? Communication is more conscious and focusing on effective communication, which makes it a mindful process. If you are trying to develop a good relationship, if you are trying to be fully present within an interpersonal interaction, being more mindful, being more present and focused, trying to shut out as much of that noise as possible, will help you to be a more effective communicator. So, how do you become a great interpersonal communicator? Well, you want to mindfully listen, so carefully and thoughtfully attend to the messages being transmitted. Of course, we'll learn more about effective listening as we go along. You want to develop some people skills, which is a set of characteristics helping you to understand and interact with others. Again, these are skills that some people come by more naturally than others, but some that we will look at as we go along in our learning of interpersonal communication. And then there's also an emotional intelligence, an EQ, which can be changed just like IQ. EQ is the ability to identify your own emotions and the emotions of others, using that information to guide one's behavior. So, are you able to understand, recognize, and relate to other people, especially when it comes to emotion? There are some people who cannot do this. And if you want to know a little bit about EQ, you can watch The Big Bang Theory, where Sheldon has a machine that he uses to try and understand other people's emotions because he's not very good at interpreting them. Thankfully, we can all learn and we don't have to have a machine that teaches us how to understand other people's emotions. Finally, this chapter tried to cram a lot into a small space, but is ethical communication necessary? I would hope the answer to this is yes, it absolutely is. but we all have an individual moral code that we follow. And so we have to do what is ethical according to our personal moral code. Though the National Communication Association does have some guidelines for us in their credo for ethical communication. So they say ethical communication should be truthful. It allows for freedom of expression and diversity, understanding and respect. It calls for an access to resources and opportunities. It requires us to respect individuality. We want to condemn degrading communication. We want to express in a pursuit of fairness. We respect privacy and confidentiality of others, and we accept responsibility for everything that we do or have communicated. I hope this has given you at least a bit of a peek into what interpersonal communication is and why we study interpersonal communication. Now, if I could just tell younger me that teaching other people how to interpersonally communicate is a really good idea, that'd be great. That'd be something fun. Only we can't travel back in time. So I'll just have to tell you all. It is really good. It is really fun. And it really makes a difference in your life if you can improve your interpersonal communication skills, understand your interpersonal communication skills just a little bit better, and it will improve your life just a little bit.